This is a nice looking building, but what's so special about it? This building was designed by E.J. Lennox, one of Toronto's greatest architects. As far as I can tell, this is the oldest surviving building of his in Toronto, dating back to 1886. There are older Lennox buildings in Unionville and in Georgetown, coincidentally both on streets named Main Street. It is said that this is the first building constructed in the Annex style, a uniquely Toronto style combining elements of Queen Anne and Romanesque. Now, throughout his career, Lennox worked in a number of styles, but he's probably most closely associated with Romanesque revival. Now, let's go have a look at a very different house that he designed. And this Gothic revival building is, of course, Casa Loma, a well-known landmark in Toronto. It was built for Sir Henry Pellet in the years leading up to the First World War. It has a great view over the city, being situated on a bluff on top of the old Lake Iroquois shoreline. I covered that shoreline in my earlier video on Toronto shoreline over the last several thousand years. I'll put a magic link up here and another one down in the description so you can find it after you finish watching this video. Sir Henry only lived here for about a decade. He ran into financial difficulties and the city ultimately seized the building for unpaid property taxes. After that, it was used as a restaurant, a nightclub, and then a tourist attraction. This is not the only work that Lennox did for Sir Henry. He also designed the Toronto Power Generating Station in Niagara Falls. That's in my video on power generation in Niagara Falls, links in the usual places. And that wasn't the only electrical facility that was designed by Lennox. This is a transformer station just a few blocks from here, and he did another one in Etobicoke. Now, let's go look at one of Lennox's other residential works that was more for short-term residences.
This is the King Edward Hotel. The original 8-story portion was built from 1901 to 1903 by Lennox and an architect from Chicago for George Gooderham's company. Yes, the same Gooderham family as the distillery and the Flatiron building. The 18-story tower was a later addition. The King Eddie, as it's commonly known, has hosted many famous people including some band from Liverpool. Next, let's look at a longer-term residence. Much longer term. Lennox built this mausoleum in Mount Pleasant Cemetery for Hart Massey, a prominent industrialist and philanthropist. He's the Hart in Hart House at University of Toronto, and he's the Massey in Massey Hall. He ran the family business, Massey Manufacturing, for many years. That's the Massey in Massey Ferguson agricultural equipment. Lennox had done work for Massey before. He built the company's head office in 1883. As you can see, it's meeting the same fate as many historic buildings in Toronto. Only the facade is being retained for a new building. He built a subsequent office building for the company in 1899 as part of its factory complex. It's now a condominium and is the last remaining building from the complex. Lennox did other industrial and commercial buildings. Let's look at a few. The Milburn building on Colborne Street, built in 1886, was originally a warehouse. This neoclassical building on Yonge Street was built in 1905 for the Bank of Toronto, one of the forerunners of today's TD Bank. And this building on Toronto Street was built in 1914 for the Excelsior Life Insurance Company. Like the power generating station I showed you earlier, it's in the Beaux-Arts style. Lennox also designed government buildings, and this is one of them. It's Postal Station G on Queen Street East, built in 1913 in the neoclassical style. It's now a library and community center. Now let's look at his best-known government building. This is City Hall, or, as it's now known, Old City Hall. Built from 1889 to 99, it's one of his best-known works, and like many of his buildings, it's in the Richardson Romanesque style. City Hall's clock tower was the tallest structure in Canada for nearly 2 decades. City Council denied him a plaque denoting him as the architect, as they were angry about cost overruns, so he had stonemasons carve his name into the building. There are faces carved in the stone too. Many of them are supposedly city councillors, and the one with the handlebar mustache is Lennox. Our next stop is another building which, like Casa Loma, ended up in government hands even though it didn't start out that way. This is the Toronto Athletic Club on College Street, just west of University Avenue. It was built in 1894, but the club went bankrupt just 5 years later, and the building went through a series of owners, including the city, who renamed it the Stewart Building after a former mayor. It's now used by the University of Toronto after having previously been used by two other colleges, the Ontario College of Art and Collège des Grands Lacs. Now, some would argue that there's only one thing more powerful than government, so let's finish with that. This Gothic Revival building is St. Paul's Anglican Bloor Street, built from 1909 to 1913. Lennox attended this church and had been responsible for additions to the previous church building. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tour of some of the contributions E.J. Lennox made to the city's architectural heritage. If you did, please like and subscribe.